And welcome back to Fourth and Pain, the only pro wrestling show hosted by an NFL athlete 2,000 miles away from me, Redskins defensive end Adam Carriker. I am weight loss champion. You like that? I got that one in for you, Adam.
I love that.
Thank you. And Chuck Carroll. And on the other end of the phone, yes, a three-way conversation, a triple threat, if you will, the proprietor of Dukes Wrestling and radio personality here in D.C., Chad Dukes. How are you, sir?
Guys, how are you? I've been enjoying the show. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, thank you very much for giving us a home there on Dukes Wrestling. Very much, man. We greatly appreciate that. We're putting the show up there. We're putting the show on Fourth and Pain, and you've been a champion of ours since the very beginning, dude. We cannot thank you enough.
Yeah, man. I remember when Adam came to town and Graham Paulson, our Redskins reporter at the radio station, said, "This dude's got a World Heavyweight Championship belt in his locker. You got to talk to him." I was like, I knew that was somebody that we could do dealings with, and I appreciate you guys putting the show up on the website. People seem to really be liking it.
Well, honest opinion, what do you think of it? I mean, you're the only opinion that really matters. We care about people, but we care about you the most.
It's two guys talking wrestling, man. It's going to be difficult for me to be objective, but I think the show gets better every week, and I think that you guys are getting some exposure. I'm noticing you on websites all over the place that I check every day, so it seems to me that it's onward and upwards for Fourth and Pain.
We're trying, man. I'm in there with the program director CK damn near every day. Have you listened? Have you listened? Will you put us on now? Will you put us on now? And so maybe just to put a little pressure on him. What if you go into his office tomorrow and you say, "Hey, make it happen, Captain"?
Is that why you booked me on the show, so I can shill for you at 106.7 The Fan?
I have my motives, yes.
And you know what? I think you should do a Rudy thing. Like maybe instead of a jersey, you take in your mic and you set it on his desk. And if you don't give these guys the opportunity, I'm done. What do you think of that, Jack?
Well, boys, I have about an hour commute. I will think about that the entire way up to the radio station.
It's a start.
All right, so let's talk some wrestling here. WWE is on the verge of releasing a DVD featuring the top 50 finishers of all time. And as a matter of fact, they've gone through and they've ranked them. And I just kind of wanted to get a gauge as to how you guys feel about these rankings. I have a top 5 of my own. I know, Carriker, you have a top 5 of your own. But is this a general consensus at number 1? It should, and it is Stone Cold Steve Austin's Stunner?
I'll go ahead and take that first. Just as far as what the Stunner meant and as far as how big Stone Cold Steve Austin's character was, yeah, I have no problem with it being the number 1 finisher. Technically, is it the most entertaining finisher? I don't know. I know that I probably didn't mark out for anything as much as I marked out for that. I know that it would be better than if you want to go down the iconic list of wrestlers, and I'm sure his fame influenced whether or not it was picked. I like it better than the Rock Bottom. I like it better than Sweet Chin Music, the Big Boot and the Big Leg. I don't know what else you would put, but as wrestling has kind of developed, the wrestlers that we grew up with, their finishers have become more setup moves, and so while I love the bionic elbow, I love the top rope elbow drop. Those kind of don't compare with how dramatic wrestling finishers have gotten. So as far as whether or not I have a problem with Austin being number 1, no. On any wrestling list, I have no problem with Stone Cold Steve Austin holding the number 1 spot.
Adam, what about you, man?
If you're talking about what it meant for wrestling, if you're talking about the individual who's performing it, absolutely, I have no problem with it being number 1. Personally, myself, I just look at the move itself because I have a move on here that you suggested earlier to Chuck today, Chad. And actually, I didn't know who the dude was. I'd never seen it before. I saw it on YouTube, and I've got it number 2. So I just look at the move specifically itself as far as for me when I'm ranking finishers. What about you, Chuck?
Well, I think that I got no problem whatsoever with Austin being number 1. My biggest problem comes down the list, but Radio 101 says you if you allude to a move and then you don't say what it is, I'm just hitting you with this knowledge as a pseudo broadcast professional and a former Wacky Morning sidekick DJ guy. You got to say what the move is. And we're talking about Petey Williams' Canadian Destroyer. Of course, it didn't make WWE's list. But Chad, when you showed me that in the studio this afternoon, you could have knocked me over with a feather. That was the most incredible thing I had ever seen in my entire life.
You hadn't seen that move before, Chuck?
Well, I had seen it, but I was just trying to play it up like it's a Vic bit. #Birds Baseball.
Well, I mean,
I'd honestly never seen it before, to be honest with you. When I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh! I watched it like 5 times in like 30 seconds. I couldn't believe it.
Well, the guy selling has such a crucial role in the Canadian Destroyer, and if you haven't seen it, Petey Williams for some reason was fired from TNA Wrestling. I have no idea why, but it's sickening. And the pile driver kind of has been weaned out of professional wrestling for good reasons. I mean, you had just so many guys, including the aforementioned Steve Austin, have their necks snapped because of it. To just be able to execute that, and you got to have a smaller guy to do it. As far as just visually appealing, that has to be in everybody's top 5, I would assume.
Oh, no doubt. And like you said, that is definitely a 2-man finisher, but holy crap, that is like the pile driver from hell. It's like a sunset flip and a pile driver all rolled into one, and it looks like he was absolutely shot off of a trampoline. Incredible. We'll put a link to that up there on fourthandpain.com and on Duke's Wrestling as well.
When you talk about finishers, though, are we just limiting the finishers to singles competition? Because I got to be honest, some of my favorite finishers of all times have been with tag teams. Like, I think that when you got 2 guys involved, it opens up so many possibilities. And so when you guys are doing a list, I don't know what the WWE is doing, but are you guys limiting it to singles competition?
I was for the sake of argument, but I'm certainly open to hear what you're saying.
I would say you could put anything on there. I mean, mine are all singles, but hey, you want to throw a tag team on there, absolutely.
Well, if 3D comes to mind, the Dudley Death Drop immediately, but I have to say that the soft spot for me, the Doomsday Device. I think the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors, that, putting the guy up on your shoulders off the top rope, toppling him. I remember getting so excited because it took a second to set up the finisher. You knew it was coming. And as far as I'm concerned, you're not going to be able to beat that. And I would have that. I would make an argument for that being the greatest finisher in the history of wrestling at any point. It doesn't look as impressive now as it used to. And again, tag teams are kind of using it now to set up, their finishing move. But I just remember that having a huge effect on me watching as a fan when I was younger.
You're listening to Fourth and Pain with Adam Carriker and Chuck Carroll and special guest tonight, Chad Dukes. And Chad, you just hit on something that's probably pretty near and dear to Adam's heart, having played with James Laurinaitis out there in St. Louis for a little bit.
Yeah, what's funny is when you talk about their finisher, I actually had a chance to talk with James's dad, Animal, for one of the games for about an hour, a game I didn't play, and he talked about having to do that move over and over, and he used to get really mad at guys who would just basically, just come out and just job out because they'd messed up, and McMahon would make him come out and do it over and over again. So he loved the move, he loved doing it, but he just talked about how he had to do it over and over because it was so hard to do and get it right.
That's nuts. I mean, there's so much more conscious now, well, in your sport, Adam, but in wrestling as well now, about concussions and about, making sure the guys are limiting those bumps. And speaking of finishers, when is the last time we saw, a power bomb? I mean, I know that Ryback has been coming out and doing power bombs lately, but for a while they completely outlawed them. And, I just remember, Sid Vicious, you remember the Jackhammer power bomb. The last ride power bomb that the Undertaker used to do. I mean, you couldn't beat it with a stick as far as a finishing move, and they've kind of gone away from that the same way they have the pile driver just because of health concerns.
And it's interesting that you say that. I think that things like that are slowly making their way back into the ring. For what it's worth, I just did some research. The Road Warriors are on this WWE list. The Doomsday Device checks in at number 17, so there's your answer there. But
that's tragically low.
As for pile drivers, the Undertaker comes in at number 2 with the Tombstone. That's another one that I have a difficult time arguing with. You talk about just an iconic finisher. Aside from his matches at WrestleMania against Triple H and Shawn Michaels, man, when he hit that Tombstone, dude, it was over.
It's funny you talk about the Tombstone. That's why I don't want to criticize because I was at both Shawn Michaels, Undertaker WrestleMania matches and both Triple H Undertaker WrestleMania match. I saw them both live, and I'm not trying to, name drop here or whatever, but what it did was to get those matches over, there was a lot of kicking out from finishers. And while it was exciting in person, I always wondered about that. I was like, they spent an entire career building up the mysticism surrounding The Undertaker and surrounding that Tombstone pile driver and how nobody kicked out from it. And then for 4 years in a row, you had guys kicking out from, several Tombstone pile drivers. But again, it kind of gave you more control than that seated pile driver, a la Jerry the King Lawler, where you had guys that were, screwing up their backs, screwing up their necks, and they went away from that. And The Undertaker to the best of my knowledge, has never really injured anyone with that move.
It's funny that you say that, because watching those WrestleMania matches myself, I thought the same thing, just as far as, you don't kick out of these moves, and all of a sudden they're kicking out of a couple, they're kicking out of chair shots. I mean, they even did Sweet Chin Music into the Pedigree, and he got out of it. I couldn't believe it. So I'm with you on that same page. And as far as just the safety, you can tell they're just trying to be more safety and cautious. In fact, TNA about a year and a half ago, Mr. Anderson had this whole concussion thing going on for a couple of months where he couldn't wrestle because of it. And, they were kind of playing it up. He should tough it out. And Anderson was talking about how they're trying to be more, health conscious and stuff like that. So I think it's definitely interesting how it crosses over, all sports.
Well, real quick,
Chuck, where do you put submission moves as far as your finishers? There's some ones I like. I love the cattle mutilation. There's the CM Punk has got several of them, but sometimes I feel like they're anticlimactic. And the sharpshooter, the figure four, scorpion deathlock, they're all kind of not applied to that. But sometimes I feel like a submission move applied by a guy that is not known as a submission wrestler can end up being an anticlimactic end to a match.
Yeah, I mean, I was never really a fan of the Scorpion leg lock that Sting would use. I'm a big Sting mark, like he was my guy absolutely growing up.
Sure.
But I was a bigger fan of the Scorpion death drop. For me, the figure four leg lock, even though it was the Nature Boy, like you said, was a little bit anticlimactic. But the one guy, when it came to submission moves, that I always got sized, to use 1067 terminology, that I got excited to see, and obviously did not make this list, was Chris Benoit with the crippler crossface. That thing, to me, was just amazing. And the way that he sold it with that sort of intensity where, like, literally every muscle in his body was ripping and he's screaming and the guy that he's got it locked on is screaming until he taps out. That, to me, was a hell of a finisher. What about you?
I agree.
Adam?
To be honest with you, I always loved the torture rack. And I think it's, Lex Luger, I think he could have done maybe a little bit more. But the fact of putting a guy up on your shoulders, bouncing him up and down, and if the guy's got any girth or bigness to him whatsoever, I mean, that's impressive. I go against 330-pound guys all the time, and I think about putting a guy like that on my shoulders and putting him in the rack and holding him there for however long, 30 seconds, I don't know. I always thought that was cool. I like finishers. It annoys me when they grab the ropes half the time and get out of it that way. I don't know. That just seems to annoy me.
Well, just for the sake of argument here, because we're running out of time, I want to quickly run down the rest of WWE's top five and just get you guys' takes. We got Triple H's Pedigree at number 3, The Rock Bottom at 4, and believe it or not, cracking the top 5, Jake the Snake Roberts' DDT, rounding out the top 5. Is there any big surprise in that top 5 for you, Chad?
You're breaking up with me, boys.
Well, I was
I can hear you now.
Okay, I was
responding to Jake the Snake. The DDT is one of my favorite moves of all time, and the fact that now you see Randy Orton, you see The Miz, and you see all these different variations of the DDT now, that was all because of Jake the Snake and the short arm clothesline. Jake the Snake had a really impressive arsenal, and it's so sad the way that his life has kind of gone. But yeah, if anybody that didn't like the DDT and doesn't appreciate the fact that now it's one of the best in the middle of the match moves you possibly can, it still gets a big pop. I love it when guys sell it by doing the headstand legs straight up in the air. I was watching Impact actually this evening, and RVD sold one of those vicious DDTs to Jeff Hardy that I've ever seen. One of my favorite moves of all time, my finishing moves.
I remember I was growing up, and I had a few tussles growing up. I wasn't always this pleasant, Chuck. But anyway, two of my favorite things to do is I would DDT a kid. And I broke one kid's neck. And if, the fight went my way, which it tended to most of the time, at the end, I like to put him in the sharpshooter, Bret Hart's move. I love to just do that. And I don't know, for some reason, those were the two moves that I always loved to perform and do on other guys when, they piss me off. So
wait,
yeah, Chuck, I don't know about you, but I've never been in a real fight and beaten a guy so badly I could perform the sharpshooter on him. That has yet to happen to me in my life.
That is badass, dude. If you could literally get somebody in a shoot fight to tap out with the sharpshooter, you're a winner in life. That's all I have to say about that.
Have you seen the well, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I wasn't, it was just something I used to have fun with, and it was my way of fighting without actually bloodying the kid, because then you would get the call home, then you would get in trouble with dad. So that was my way of getting the kid to shut up without actually getting give him a bloody face, and now you get in trouble with everyone else.
It's a very unique thought process. I've never had to worry about that, to be honest with you.
I was like 10, so.
Wow.
Have you seen the? Speaking of finishers, the F5 is one of my favorites. But I'm friends with Matt Bloom, who of course right now is Lord Tensai in the WWE, and he was A-Train before that and Albert before that. There is a video online of him taking an F5 from Brock Lesnar, where how his neck and spinal cord was not completely collapsed is beyond me, which is ironic considering that the top rope with a 450 splash that Lesnar tried, or was it a shooting star press, I forget, that he attempted and almost broke his own damn neck. It's almost fun to watch, and you hate to say this because you respect the athletes, but when the guy's a little reckless, it's almost more fun to watch the finishers. Goldberg was like that, and Goldberg falls under a lot of criticism, but sometimes he would hit a spear. I remember he hit Christian one time and folded him up so bad. And I was like, oh, my God, how are these guys walking away from this? And every once in a while, you'll get a guy that's just a little bit reckless, and he makes finishers that much more interesting.
Adam, I think that you and I actually got a chance to see that F5 right before we started rolling tape on that. And I remember seeing Albert just come down on that. I mean, it was literally right on the top of his head.
Brutal. Yeah, brutal.
I didn't think he was going to get up. I, honest to God, did not think he was going to get up.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that. I mean, it was like it was bent. I don't know. It was like, I don't know how it didn't snap off, to be honest with you. And talking about the Goldberg thing, that's actually the spear and the jackhammer. That's actually my favorite finishing move of all time, just because the way he used to just. It's like he was spearing the dude in half. It's like he was just destroying his intestines. I love that.
Well, are you guys annoyed at all that, again, I don't want to say Edge because he's a Hall of Famer and he's phenomenal, but the spear is used way too much now. And you've got guys that are like 185 pounds trying to pull off the spear, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. If you're going to try to use that move as a finishing move, I think you've got to be Goldberg size or Batista size or one of these larger guys that can make that move seem credible as a finisher.
I absolutely agree with you. I hated watching Edge's spear because I saw Goldberg's, and Edge's spear to me was almost laughable. And I mean, when you see like the Big Show do it now, I mean, he's got all that girth and he gets that momentum going. I mean, it reminds me of that Goldberg spear, and that's what I like. I completely agree with you.
Well, I got to disagree with you guys a little bit, and Edge's spear to me was just absolutely incredible. And I remember a triple threat tag team match at a WrestleMania. It was Edge and Christian against the Dudleys and the Hardys, I believe, for the tag titles. And Edge did a spear off a ladder that was unlike anything I had ever seen before. And I believe that he drove Jeff Hardy about 10 feet off of that ladder right into the center of the ring. And we just talked about Matt Bloom maybe not being able to get up. I didn't think Jeff Hardy was going to be able to get up after this. That, to me, is why I actually am okay with Edge and the Spear, which actually ranks somewhere in the mid-20s, 23rd on the WWE's top finishers of all time list.
Yeah, the problem is whenever the WWE makes a list, and I love the WWE, but they don't, I mean, what they do is they try to put over their big names. And I think when you have the Pedigree and you have the Rock Bottom and you have the Stunner as your top three guys, I mean, I'm sorry. I like the Rock. The Rock's great. The Rock Bottom isn't a top 20 finisher, in my opinion. They're guys, like right now, Justin Gabriel, his 450 splash is about as good as you get. But because he's not one of those big name guys, they're just not going to put him on that list.
Well, the list is kind of chock full of interesting names. Sergeant Slaughter's on here with his Cobra Clutch. Bruno Sammartino's Bear Hug made the list. Iron Sheik's Camel Clutch is on there. Mr. Perfect is on there. Bob Backlund. RVD. Sting made the list, even though he's never set foot in McMahon's ring. Flash Funk, for God's sakes, at number 37 with the 450 splash. I mean, I actually think that they did a better job with this list than they have in the past. These are some names that, you know, they're not exactly household names anymore. They didn't limit it to who's currently on the roster or the roster of the past decade. They actually dug deep into their archive. So
yeah, but they had 50 names to fill. That probably had something to do with it. Who had the best frog splash, do you guys think, of all time? Because there's been a rack of guys that have done that one.
Eddie Guerrero. I got to say Eddie Guerrero.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Watching him Monday nights on Nitro when WCW used to open up the 8 o'clock hour with that Lucha division. I mean, it was pretty incredible to watch him get up in his prime. I don't think he was ever quite that good when he signed with WWE, but in his prime, when Rey Mysterio was in the Lucha Libre division there in WCW, La Parka, for God's sake.
You didn't like when he put the laxative in the burrito that the Big Show was eating, and the Big Show was crapping so much he couldn't get off the toilet, and he stole all the toilet paper. That was phenomenal shtick.
Well, on that note, we are chock full of time. Matter of fact, we're in overtime. Chad Dukes, again, we cannot thank you enough for the opportunity and joining us tonight, man. It's been a great privilege and an honor.